Hello everyone and welcome to Study Room. I am Pratyaksha, your biology teacher. Today I'll be teaching you chapter 1 of biology that deals with cell. Cell is known as the fundamental unit of life, and in this chapter, while we are starting biology afresh in grade 9, let's begin with that tiniest component that make up our whole body. Let's learn what are the components of cell, what are the different types of plant cells, what are animal cells, what is the basic differences between a plant cell and an animal cell, and we'll be learning all about and so much more about this basic yet very important fundamental unit of life, cell. So let's get started. Cell as a structural and functional unit of life. We say that cell is the fundamental unit of life, right? That means that cell is both the structural as well as the functional unit of life, okay? Because cell forms the basic structure of an organism. In this last flow chart, if you may look over here, we may see that a group of cell, they make up tissue, a group of tissues, they make up an organ, then a group of organs, they make up an organ system, and a group of organ systems, they make up an organism. Okay, so what happens is that these cells, they function in a very all right, then an organ is formed. Okay, and an organ is formed when different organs come and they perform one specific function. That is, what is the basic important function? The function is the essential living of an organism, right? So when that organ, when a group of organs come and they work together to perform some metabolic function, some bodily function that leads to a person's survival, be it a person, be it an animal, be it a plant, be it even a unicellular organism. And by the way, unicellular organism, by the name only, it suggests that this organism is not made up of various organ systems or organ, or even tissue for that matter. This organism, this entity is just made up of one cell. Yes, there are some, creatures that are, their survival, their existence depends on only one cell. Only one cell, they carry all the functions of that particular organism. All right, we'll be learning about them, don't worry. Meanwhile, what I'm trying to say here is, when in multicellular organisms, like be it as humans or be it animals, all right, even in some plants, okay, so there are groups of organ working cohesively, working very together coordinatively. They form an organ system, and when two, four, a lot of organ systems, they come together so that a whole function of survival, living, existence, it occurs. Then that organism, a functioning organism, that is how a functioning organism is, it exists. That is what a functioning organism is composed of. All right. So a collection of similar cells that perform an organized function form a tissue. Okay, tissues, generally speaking, they are of similar sort of cells, that is similar cells which are of the same structure and they perform the same functions. All right. So tissues could also be clubbed together from different kind of cells. Okay. So for example, say a category of cells, they are forming A tissue. Okay, then we will have, say, B category of cells, they are forming B tissue. Okay, so A category of tissue consists all the cells which are A in nature, which are of the similar structure and they carry out the similar function that one A cell does. All right, the same thing is going on with the B category. So when these kind of tissues, they are grouped together, they are clubbed together, that is how an organ is formed. And when a lot of organs club together, an organ system, it happens. And when a lot of organ system, they function, and when in one coordination, all right, then an organism exists. Each tissue serves a particular purpose and can be combined with other tissues to form organs. This is what I meant. So this is the level of organization starting with the cell. So before we dive into the biological components of how an organism functions, it is, it is very important, it is very necessary that we learn about the fundamental unit of life, right? We learn about that one single, structure, you know, uh, owing to which an organism, okay, owing to which an organism exists, all right? What makes up an organism? So we have learned earlier in the chemistry chapters that molecules, a group of atoms, they form molecules, right? So a group of molecules, when they come together of different elements, all right, so they are performing some certain functions, and when they are clubbed together, when they are, when they exist together in a fashion that allows that entity, that living entity, to carry on some specific function. So a group of molecules, when clubbed in such a manner, they form cells. Okay, and when cells they club together, they form tissues. When tissues they club together, they form an organ. Like you can see over here, this is a heart. Heart is an organ. And when a group of organs they are clubbed together, they form an organ system. For example, here we have this digestive system. Okay, we have these organs working together. There is liver, there is pancreas, there is stomach, there is your small intestine, large intestine. Of course, it starts with your mouth, and then there is the esophagus, that food pipe. Okay, so all of these organs, they are clubbed together, they are working together, and they're performing one specific function. What is that function? That function is of digestion. So yes, maybe your food only churns and grinds the mouth, and breaks the food particle into smaller pieces, and all of those pieces go inside your stomach where gastric juices are released. So yes, different functions are carried out at different sites, but what is the overall nature of that function? What is the overall nature of all these organs that are working together? The overall function is of digestion, and hence we have this digestive system and a group of organ systems. So let's say this digestive system plus your respiratory system plus your excretory system, all of these, when they are clipped together, an organism exists. That is how an organism exists. Cell as a structural and functional unit of life, they carry out essential life purposes, like I have been just telling you. What are these essential life purposes? They are metabolic purposes. It happens even in unicellular organisms, that is organisms which only have one cell. Okay, and even in multicellular organisms, that means organisms which have more than one cells, maybe millions and billions of cells working together. Okay, so in this diagram over here, we can see this is a diagram of a cell, all right, and this is a diagram of an animal cell, to be specific. Okay. So we have the cell membrane. We'll be learning all the components of a cell, so don't worry, just let me point it out to you here, and we'll be learning about them in detail later. So here we have the cell membrane. Let's just visualize it like that. It's not a literal reference. You may not call literally that nucleus is the brain of the cell, but let's say for the understanding purpose, for our visualization purpose, let's consider nucleus to be the brain of the cell. All right, that means all the important functions, okay, all the important functions that constitute an organism from the cellular level. We are talking here from the perspective of cells. So from the cellular level, those functions, they occur in the nucleus. Just for the visualization purpose, I am calling here nucleus to be the brain. Inside the nucleus, we have a spherical structure, that is the nucleolus. Okay. In the cytoplasm is that fluid matrix of the cell. We have other entities like vacuole, there is lysosome, there is mitochondria, which famously you must have heard it. I'm assuming that mitochondria is known as the powerhouse of the cell. Okay, and then we have the Golgi complex, which we also call as the Golgi apparatus. So we'll be learning all about this. Okay, so let's get on it one by one. But first of all, the basic difference between plants and animal cell, why when we are calling that cell is the structural and functional unit of life, but in different organisms different functions are being carried out by these cells, right? So the kind of functions that plants need for their survival may not be same for animals, or maybe for us humans, right? So there are different set of functions for plants and animals, and hence different cells performing or being capable of different functions, they exist in plants. For example, xylem, phloem, protective tissues, these are the kind of tissues, these are the kind of functions that cells perform, a group of cells perform in plants, and the organs of plants are roots, stems, leaves, etc. Okay, in animals, there are tissues like muscular tissue, connective tissue, nervous tissue. We'll be learning all about these different kinds of tissue in the next chapter. But for here, let's focus on cell. And these tissues, they comprise of organs such as kidney, liver, heart, etc. So this is just to give you a basic reference of what is the difference between plants and animal cells. Who discovered cells and how? There is a famous English scientist hailing from England, Robert Hooke. He was the one to discover cell in the year 1665, that is in the 17th century, all right. So while observing a thin slice of cork through a microscope lens, okay, cork is basically the outer covering. You may also, in generally speaking, you may also call it bark, is the outer covering of a plant, of a tree, all right, not plant, a tree. It is, corks are basically dead cells, okay. But Robert Hooke, he first of examination, he observed that this cork is made up of tiny pores, okay, tiny small holes, pores, okay, and he, since they look like a very compacted sort of structure, like a cell, like cell, we also call the jail as the cell, right? And jails are what, they are compacted structures where the criminals are kept for their punishments, all right. So these small pore like structures, they were like these small components, all right. It may not be necessarily square in shape, it may be circular, it may be spherical, maybe ovoid, okay. So these pores, he called them cell while observing the cork cells. Who discovered cells and how? We have just seen that Robert Hooke, the English scientist, he discovered cell. How did he discover cell? He discovered cell when he was examining a group of, a group of cork cells, that is the dead cells, the deadened cells of the tree, which we also call as the bark. So he was examining that under the microscope, and that is how he came to know that there are other tiny small pore like structures, small cell like structures that make up the whole structure of that cork, okay. Why is cell called structural and functional unit of life? Cell is called a structural and functional unit of life because cell is that fundamental entity which is necessary for our survival. Why it is necessary for survival? Because this cell, a group of cells when grouped together, they perform functions, important functions such as metabolic functions, functions that are necessary for our survival, like digestion, that aids us in growth, okay, that aids us in digestion, that aids us in respiration. Means these cells, they carry out the function of breathing, all right. Like we inhale and we exhale, but on the microscopic level, what is happening? Millions of cells, they're working together in coordination, and they are the ones who are regulating that, yes, the oxygen is being consumed and we have to give out carbon dioxide, and they ensure that the oxygen that we breathe in is carried out to all the organs of our body, be it in our brain, be it in our heart, okay, everywhere. So there is functions like growth, digestion, respiration, and even reproduction. That means a doubling of cells. We'll also be learning about how a cell reproduces, a basic introduction in this chapter towards the end. So these are the ways why, various ways why a cell is called a structural and the functional unit of life, because it is this microscopic entity that determines what is happening in a body, that determines how a body will function. What a living organism is made of? For this, let's perform an activity. A small piece from an onion bug you have to take, and with the help of a pair of forceps, we can peel off the skin. The outermost layer of a skin is of a plant cell is known as epidermis. So epidermis is the outermost layer, all right. So while peeling off the onion, you're using a pair of forceps, because you have to be careful, because you have to just take off that external layer, that outermost layer of the concave side of the onion. That means on the inner side of the onion. All right, this side. This layer can be put immediately in a watch glass containing water, and that is going to prevent the peel from getting folded or getting dry. Okay, then after that we put a drop of water on that peel, and we transfer that to watch glass, to the slide, in order to observe it under a microscope. Okay, and when we put that onto the microscope, okay, then after that we put a drop of safranin solution on this piece, followed by a cover slip. Safranin solution is your red dye, dyes that are put on very small objects, like for example here in this experiment we are taking that epidermal layer of the onion, right? So we put the red dye on that onion layer, so that when you're observing it under the microscope, with the help of that red color, we will be able to observe that even those translucent structures that this onion was made up of, that will be visible to us because of the red color in this red dye. Okay, so we have to take care that there are no air bubbles trapped while putting on the cover slip, and then we mount it, and then we look under the microscope. So what do we find? Do we find something that Robert Hooke had found when he was observing those cork cells? No, actually we are finding a very different thing. What Robert Hooke had observed, he was observing cork, that is the dead cells, but here we will be observing onion cells. Okay, so onion was not, I mean, yes, you had peeled it off a plant, so it is gonna be dead, but when you're observing that under the microscope, since it's not yet cooked, so we will be getting some structure of the cell, some structure that is going to determine that how this onion was functioning, say when it was still attached to the plant. All right, so we can see that we have cell wall, we have the vacuole, and we have the nucleus. Of course, these names, these were later on given to these entities, but when you observe, you are going to see that there is a boundary to each cell-like structure, and this boundary is the cell wall. Okay, then there is a very a hollow structure, a big structure, that is the vacuole. Vacuole in plants, they store up food. Okay, and then there is a nucleus that I told you to visualize of being like the brain of the cell. Okay, so that nucleus is also gonna be there. So these are the kind of very small entities that make up a cell. And when you do the simple experiment, even with an onion, all right, that has been plucked off a plant, you will observe these cellular structures. You will observe the very essential components that make up of a cell, that is the nucleus, vacuole, very, very important in plant cells. So let's learn about them one by one. Can you identify each of these cells? This is the red cells. Right now you may be wondering that, oh, okay, I don't know about this cell, but slowly and gradually, when you will learn that what are the different functions that cell perform, we will also come to what are the different kind of cells, what are their specific function. Okay, so this is the red blood cells. This is found in our bloodstream. Okay, this is your neuron. This is your nerve cell. These are the cells that are there in your brain, are there in your spinal cord, etc. Okay, this is your fat cell. Okay, this is your WBC, that is your white blood cell, abbreviation for white blood cell. So, for example, here there is a red blood cell. I can also abbreviate it as RBC, where B stands for blood, C stands for cell, and R stands for red. Similarly, over here, W stands for white, and B stands for blood, and C stands for cell. So there is the RBC, and then you have the WBC. Here, this is a muscle cell. Basically, this is a muscle tissue, logically speaking, because as you can see in this diagram, there are a group of cells together, right? This is one cell. Okay, let me make it more clear to you. This here is one cell. Okay, so we have a group of cells layered together. All right, so instead of calling it a cell, we will call it tissue. This is a muscle tissue. This is a sperm cell. This is the male reproductive cell. We will also be learning about this later. So yes, this may be a little bit difficult to adjust here, but don't worry, we'll be learning all about them. Okay. The types of cell, there are two types of cells, prokaryotic cell and eukaryotic cell. Okay, prokaryotic cell, they are the bacterial cell, blue-green algae and the amoeba. That means prokaryotic cells are usually they are unicellular cells. All right, and eukaryotic cells usually they are multicellular cells. Okay, prokaryotic cells, they make up unicellular organisms, and eukaryotic cells, they usually make up multicellular organisms. So prokaryotic cell, this is found in bacterial cell, amoeba, algae, all these entities, they can function, their whole existence functions just on one cell. Okay, and that cell is prokaryotic in nature, whereas eukaryotic cells, we have animals have eukaryotic cells, plants have eukaryotic cells, even fungi, they have eukaryotic cells. All these make up the multicellular organisms, and the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells is that prokaryotic cells, the entities, the organelles that we say, the entities that are found inside the cell, we call them organelles. Okay, so the organelles inside this prokaryotic cell, they are not membrane bound. That means they are not covered by, let's just say, a boundary, a thin boundary. Okay, they are not covered by a membrane. Whereas in the eukaryotic cells, these organelles, these entities that we find inside the cell, these are covered by membrane in the eukaryotic cells. Okay, also there is a difference of nucleus, that we have a well-defined nucleus in eukaryotic cells, whereas in prokaryotic cells there is just a bunch of thread-like structure, which we call the RNA, and which a group of that they compose of nucleic acid. So a group of RNA plus other substances. I know that all these information at once is hard to digest. Okay, but don't worry. However much you are able to understand right now, it's okay. It's just a beginning. When we'll come to the later stages of what are the different organelles of a cell, that is what is a different component of the cell, and when we'll be learning about the various kinds of tissues, then this whole confusion will be sorted, and you'll be able to understand and grasp more. So just bear with me for now, and the basic difference, those pointers that you have to keep in your mind while differentiating between prokaryotic cell and eukaryotic cells is that, wait, I'll come to this diagram later, is that in the prokaryotic cell, membrane bound organelles cannot be seen. Okay, whereas in eukaryotic cell, we have membrane bound organelles. In prokaryotic cell, there is the absence of nucleus and nucleolus, and in the eukaryotic cell, the nucleus and nucleolus are present. Prokaryotic cell contain a single chromosome, and eukaryotic cell contain multiple chromosomes. Chromosomes are those structures that contain genes, that contain DNA. You may have, come upon a very, let's say, a very unique feature that resembles either your mother's or your father's, right? So some say that, oh, your eyes, they look like, they're just pretty like your mother, your hair is just as curly like your father's, right? So why are these saying things? Because there are some, some biochemical compounds present in our body that while reproduction, we are transferring them towards our offspring. Okay, so what happens is that these chromosomes, they carry genes, and these genes, they carry DNA. Okay, DNA is that code, is that hereditary code. I mean, it contains those biochemical compounds, and those are the hereditary codes that make up of, that later on go on to make some proteins, and those proteins, they determine whether your hair will be curly, whether your hair will be straight, whether you will have blue eyes, whether you have brown eyes. So I'm just giving you an idea of what a chromosome is, so that you don't understand that something very in a very hollow fashioned way, that I'm just blabbering something and you are grasping it. No, I don't want you to just take away information. I want you to understand information. Okay, so when I say that prokaryotic cell, they contain a single chromosome, and when I say that eukaryotic cell, they contain multiple chromosomes, by chromosomes I mean that they are those organelles, they are those entities present inside your cell that contains genes, that contains DNA. Okay, let's just stop at DNA for now. If you don't want this, to make this process more complicated, let's just stop at DNA. Okay, so that contain genes, that contain DNA, and DNA has that encoded biochemical formula that is going to produce protein in your body, and that is going to determine whether your hair will be curly, whether your hair will be straight. And oftentimes these genes, these DNA, there is some specific amount that that comes from our parents. That is why when we say that, oh, you look like your mother, or oh, you look more like your father, so these are because of these biochemical compound, these DNA, these genes, which are embedded in the structure chromosome. So now when I'm telling you that chromosomes contain a single prokaryotic cell contain a single chromosome, that is the hereditary component that is in the prokaryotic cell is only one, whereas in eukaryotic cells there are multiple, there is more than one, there may be 2, 3, 4, maybe even thousands and millions. All right, so this is another difference. And the last difference is that cell division in prokaryotic cell, they occur by fission and budding. Fission and budding, these are the name of some processes. Fission, in where one cell, it simply it divides into two by breaking. All right, and budding is when two the cells, they come together and they just they just attach to each other and they form one component. All right, so this fission and budding is a very simple process. There is no a chemical reaction, or there is no biochemical process that is going on. There is just simple division, okay, and there is just simple combining. Okay, so cell division in prokaryotic cell occur by fission and budding, whereas in eukaryotic cells they occur by a process where some the cell components, they are getting involved, they are performing some functions, some biochemical reaction or chain, something is happening. All right, there is not just simple division. Okay, so cell division is complicated in eukaryotic cells. It either occurs by mitosis or meiosis, and we'll be learning about these processes in detail. All right, so this is the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Like in this diagram, you may see that yes, there is an outer membrane over here, all right, and there is an outer membrane over here as well. All right, but when I say that there are no membrane bound organelles as in the entities of the cell, what I mean is that here, if you may observe, this orange body, okay, this is the mitochondria, and this is, can you see these two layers? Okay, so this is layered. Layered means this is bounded by a membrane. All right, whereas in prokaryotic cell, you don't have any other membrane bound organelles, you just have the outer wall. All right, this is what I meant. And you have a distinct nucleus and nucleolus present in the eukaryotic cell. This is the nucleus, and inside this bigger structure you have another smaller spherical sort of structure. This is your nucleolus, whereas in the prokaryotic cell there is just this nucleod, or you can also call it the nucleic acid, and that's it. There is no spherical body present over here in the prokaryotic cell. All right, then in the nucleus we found those chromosomes, that hereditary components in the nucleus. So in the eukaryotic cell there are multiple chromosomes present over here, whereas in the prokaryotic cell we only have one chromosome. Okay, and the last difference was that the cell division, it occurs in prokaryotic cell by fission or budding, and in eukaryotic cell by mitosis or meiosis. Let's move on to the first component of